Hong Kong's pro-democracy protests have dwindled. Many students return to school, but is the issue of democracy resolved here in Hong Kong? Well, joining me now is Regina Ip. She is a legislator here in Hong Kong and the former Secretary for Security. Good to see you, Regina.
Good to see you.
Okay, so do you think that the government and students will come to a resolution?
I think the government is trying very hard to avoid further use of force and try to settle this amicably through dialogue. And from the public statements made by the student leaders, I think they are now willing to talk to the Chief Secretary. They have given up some of the really quite unrealistic preconditions. And I think they are trying to achieve, some deliverables, so that they can tell their supporters the effort over the past 10 days have not been wasted.
Okay, well, the chief executive has certainly said he's not going to resign. The students want democracy in Hong Kong. Clearly, that's not an option in China for 2017. So where could the middle ground come?
Actually, Beijing is very keen to see chief executive election by universal suffrage in 2017. The dividends for Hong Kong are too obvious, The students who have talked to me, I've explained to them, you can't expect Mrs. Lam to resolve these issues in the next few days. After all, how the nominating committee is to be formed, exactly what the threshold will be, how people will nominate, that is one person, one vote, or two votes, or three, will be determined by us. Even not even the chief executive has a role. It will be left by the legislature.
So are you saying that that selection committee, when in place in 2017, could possibly be elected wholly by the people? Are you advocating that?
I'm saying the nominating committee, which have attracted so much criticism, will not necessarily debar a moderate Democrat. Extremists are likely to be debarred in any election. But if one committee member has 2 or 3 votes by secret ballot, you cannot rule out the possibility of someone like Alan Zeman giving 1 vote to a moderate Democrat. But these are issues that need to be resolved in the legislature, not between students and Mrs. Lam in the next few days.
Give us a little bit of insight about how this works. You served as Secretary for Security for many years here in Hong Kong. A lot of people say it's really Beijing who's calling the shots. The chief executive really just takes order from Beijing. Is that true?
Well, the chief executive under the Basic Law is accountable both to central authorities and to the people of Hong Kong. He needs to be someone who can work with Beijing officials, I'm sure over a crisis of this magnitude, they are in contact. But you can see the chief executive is working very hard to resolve the situation using Hong Kong resources, relying on Hong Kong law enforcement, and Hong Kong people.
How did it work, though, when you were Secretary for Security during Article 23, obviously a crisis time like today? Was the chief executive back then, Tung Chee-hwa, waiting for a directive from Beijing?
No, actually, this decision whether to go ahead or to defer enactment of the bill was reached after consultation with the Executive Council, because it is paramount to have enough votes to get the bill through. And I did over 100 hours of explanation in the legislature. By the time of the 1st July protest, the bill scrutiny procedure was completed. So the local legislature, local politics, Hong Kong people's opinion played a big part in these issues.
But surely if the legislature today said, okay, yes, we think that Hong Kong is indeed ready for democracy, that wouldn't happen without the approval of China, would it?
All they have done is to make a framework decision. The details remain to be sorted out by us. The details, how we elect the chief, will be set out in the Chief Executive Election Ordinance, a local legislation. So I will urge my Pandem colleagues not to boycott further discussions. They need to engage. They need to make sure their voice is heard.
Is Hong Kong ready for democracy, in your opinion?
Yes and no. In some way, yes. In some way, not yet ready. Party development is slow. And we need more balanced development, more professionals, more people with competence. There's a preponderance of labor, trade unionists, social workers, not enough business professionals and not enough women.
So you think definitely Hong Kong is not ready for democracy in 2017?
I wouldn't say that. We already have made great strides in democratic development since 1997. In the colonial era, the legislature was appointed, largely appointed, and civil servants acted as members of our legislature. We made huge steps forward. I think we are within reaching distance of electing our chief, and I don't think we should squander that opportunity.
Okay, so what is your estimate then, given the steps that you've now named and the direction that Hong Kong is moving? When will Hong Kong be ready for democracy?
I think if the students would engage government officials and they would honorably retire from the current protests, and the other motley groups would also disperse, Chief Secretary could reactivate stage 2 of the consultation. The timetable is tight, but we still have a chance of voting on the package by April or May next year. Have the legislation in place by summer recess 2016 so that we can vote in March 2017.
What do you make of what's happened here in Hong Kong? I think a lot of people, including C.Y. Leung, were taken by surprise at the speed, the rapidity that these protests gained force. So what is your opinion about it?
It's the first flagrant disregard of the law in our history, which could lead to a breakdown of this order. And it's happening in Hong Kong. It has happened in Hong Kong, so it's worrisome.
Thank you very much, Regina Ip, for joining us.
Thank you.